We're now in Daf Chaf Vav Amud Beis. Amar Shmuel. Okay, I read this Gemara over about 5 times. I hope I got it. Psul Basar Aval Bailim Niskapu. Right, the Mishnah gives us that whole long list of cases where the dam went on the wrong place. Went lamala instead of lamata instead of lamala, bifnim, the whole 9 yards. Comes on Shmuel and he says that this is only a psul in the basar. Amal bailam is kapra, but the kapara, the ritzui of the carbon, is valid for the bailamite timer. The Amar Kra Vani nisativ lachem al hamizbeach lechaper, meaning anywhere on the mizbeach it is mechaper. Kemen shigia dam lemizbeach niskapru bailam. Now, does this mean any mizbeach, even the mizbeach hapnimi? Or, for example, if you go back to the beginning of the Mishnah spoke about kevesh. L'chora, kevesh is not mizbeach. So this pasuk of nesativ lachem lemizbeach al mizbeach lechaper doesn't apply to the kevesh. So this is a whole to-do in Tosfos. And Tosfos comes to the conclusion that if the dam was placed not on the mizbeach but rather on the kevesh, then there's no kapar of the bailam. Again, this is not at all clear. There's a lot of, shall I say, source material to prove that the kevesh is like the mizbeach. Then Tosfos vacillates back and forth whether this psak of Shmuel applies even to dam that went on the wrong mizbeach. Then Tosfos quotes Rashi that the chatos where the zrikas adam is on the mizbeach hachitzon, if the dam was applied on the mizbeach hapnimi, it would be totally possible. So basically, according to Tosfos, it comes out that Shmuel's point here is only with regard to lamala lamata, and that's it. Weiter. Fragt die Gemara, ihachi basar nami, if you're going with this drasha, that nasati lechem mizbeach lekapara, and it means kevan shigi adam mizbeach is mechaper, is then why shouldn't the basar be possible? Omakro lechaper. Right? I'm only saying this halach of higi adam mizbeach says the Torah only lechaper, lekapara nasativ. I'm giving you any part of the mizbeach for kapara, but but not with regard to the meat of the basar. So basically, what we're saying is that according to Shmuel, as far as the kapara's carbon is concerned, any part of the mizbeach is like any other part of the mizbeach. Alma. So what do we see? Because Sava, we see that Shmuel holds shalobim komo kim komo dami. That even though he placed the dam not in its proper place, nevertheless, it's considered a kapara. It's mechaper. It's considered as if it was bimkomo. Now, this principle of Shmuel could have an impact, lakula, as Shmuel says lakula, that there is a kapara, in another context as well. And that is the issue of a zrika of the dam, shalom komon, in its wrong place. Is there any point whatsoever to try to receive any leftover dam that hasn't yet been subject to zrika and do another zrika in the right place, get it right this time? Well, according to Shmuel, it's pointless because since shalom koma kibim koma dummy, and therefore, even though he put the dam up instead of down and out instead of in, and so forth and so on, it's still machaper. Then it'd be absolutely superfluous to go ahead and do another zrika and get it right because you already achieved kapara. So the Gemara right away asks, well, Tanan ve'idach Pirkin later on in the next parak, that's the third parak of Zevachim Adaf Lamed Beis, it says in the Mishnah, in the son al Kevesh, Shalom Keneged Yisod, the son es ha nitanim lamata lamalo, lamalo lamata, and so forth and so forth. There's nitanim b'fnim b'chutz, nitanim b'chutz. In all these cases where he did the Zrika Shalom Komon, im yesh dam hanefesh, Yachzor HaKosher V'Yikabel. He should do another Kabbalas and Dam on any Dam HaNefesh that still remains spurting out of the neck of the animal. V'Yisal Kedaitik, according to Shmuel Shalom Kom Kim Komon, Lama Li Yachzor HaKosher V'Yikabel. What would be the point? It seems like an exercise of futility to go ahead and have a second Kabbalah Dam if you were already Machaper on the first Kabbalah, on the first Zrika, because Shalom Kom Kim Komon Dami. So what's the point of this effort to go back to the animal and start all over again with a new Kabbalah Adam? But maybe what the Mishnah has in mind is Lahatim Bosav Achila. Maybe when Shmuel said Shalom Kom Kim Koman Dami and it generates a kapara, he did not mean to say that the basar could be eaten. Because since the Zrika was Shalom Koma, that Zrika cannot be mat to the basar. Gemara says that's impossible. Mi ika Zrika lo mechaperes v'sharia basar v'achila. Wait, just 1 second. One second. Where did I mess up here? Mi ika Zrika de lo mechaperes. What do you mean de lo mechaperes? I have to say Kapitel Tilim. Hashem, help me here. Mi ika Zrika de lo mechaperes. How do you read that? Ah, I got it. Finally. The Israelis say Asimon Yarad. The second Kabbalah Zrika with any dam tamtis that's left in the neck of the animal is not a Zrika Mechaperes. He already achieved kapara according to Shmuel because Shalom Kom Konon with the first Zrika. So now you're going to tell me that the second Zrika, which is ineffective as far as generating kapara, is going to be mat to the basar? No such thing. Either the Zrika's mat is mechaper, and then it could be mat to the basar, or if this Zrika cannot be mechaper, in this case because he already had the kapara, then it wouldn't be matir. So Gemara says the following. You know what? The Mishnah is talking about a different kind of a case. Idi Yave kosher, if that mistaken Zrika Saddam, Shalom Koma and above and below and so forth and so on was implemented by a Kohen kosher, Hachinami, then you're right. Shmuel would say Shalom Koma Dami and the Zrika is Machaper, and there's no point to another Zrika. But what's the Mishnah talking about? Hachma is kina diyavi pas. That the Zrika was done by a Kohen Tameh, by a Kohen Balmum, someone who's possible. Okay. So what happens now? So now the Zrika is not Mechaper because the Kohen is disqualified. So he can't achieve a kapara through his Zrika. He went ahead and done a Zrika in the wrong place. Okay, Shmuel would hold that's not ma'akev and doesn't possibly the kapara, but he's a Kohen Posel. And since he's a Kohen Posel, therefore the kapara is completely invalid, the carbon is Posel, and in that case, it's absolutely necessary for him to do a new Kabbalah to replace the other Kabbalah if there's any Dam Tamtis left in the neck. Okay, now the Gemara goes into a sugya called Dichui. How is it possible, asks the Gemara, that he can do another Kabbalah when the first Kabbalah was possible? Meaning, we're going to send the Kohen Posel to the to the bench. We're going to bring in from the bullpen a Kohen Kosher to do the second Kabbalah. But it doesn't matter. You can't do a second Kabbalah because of a principle called Dichui, which means that when the first Zrika was done by someone who was Posel, by a disqualified Kohen, then that carbon is completely Posel. It means that the avoda of the Posel generates a psul in the carbon. The carbon is Posel. So therefore, a heavy Dichui. And I'm going to prove to you that there's halach of Dichui, that once the Zrika was done and it was invalid, you could not do a second Zrika because the invalid Zrika is doche the carbon. It invalidates the carbon. And the Mishnah says, where's this Mishnah? Later on, Alamid Beis, v'kol shekibu chutzu zan chutzim kolmon, im yesh dam nefesh yachzor kosher v'kabel. There's a separate halacha, says the Mishnah in Kabbalah, that if the Kabbalah was done by a Kohen Posel, and he had in mind chutzim zman chutzim komo, then the disqualified Kohen could not generate a psul in Kabbalah. And therefore he goes back and does another Kabbalah. But let's be medayek. Kiblo in. When do we have this possibility of going back and doing another Kabbalah that's only to replace the first Kabbalah that was done by a Kohen Posel, but Zarko lo? But if the Kohen Posel had done a Zrika, then there's no option. There's no possibility. We cannot go back and do another Zrika. Why not? Says the Gemara, my time allowed me shum davi dichli. It must be because the Kohen Posel, once he does the Zrika, he completely disqualifies the carbon in an irreversible way, and there's no possibility of saving the carbon by doing another Kabbalah to substitute for the first Kabbalah. In other words, we would make in the first Kabbalah that was implemented by a Kohen Posel, and we can replace him, take out of the bullpen a Kohen Kosher and do another Kabbalah, but we can't do that with Zrika. The zrika clinches the entire kapara. And once the zrika was done by a Kohen Pasul, that's it. The carbon is Pasul. That's the final. That's the Makam Patish. So you just answered that Shmuel could explain the Mishnah by saying, you know what, we can allow for a second a second avoda to replace the first one if the shalobim koma was done by apostle, by a Kohen apostle. But what about dichud? So Gemara answers, "Lo mishum de apostle machshava." We're not holding of dichud. We're holding of a new psul that generates a psul in the carbon, and that is b'machshava. He had a machshava of chutz, lizmanu or chutzim koma, that generates a psul in the carbon, and that cannot be rectified because the carbon is possible. And the Mishnah says explicitly that we're dealing with a case where the hostel had an intention that should be chutzim zman or chutzim koma. And in that case, the Mishnah is saying that you cannot rectify the carbon if the zrika was done chutzim zman or chutzim koma. Because again, the machshav of chutzim zman or chutzim koma generates a psul in the carbon, which cannot be removed. I don't get it. There are four avodos, and certainly a machshav of chutzim koma, chutzim zman passes even during Kabbalah. So why do you say that now, since the Kohen Pasul at the time of the Kabbalah had in mind Shalom Koma Shalom Lizmanom, he could do another Kabbalah, replace it with the first one? Why not? Your logic is that there's a psul machshava. If there's a psul machshava, the psul machshava should operate even with regard to Kabbalah. And furthermore, mi pasla machshava. Is it really true that there's such a thing as generating a psul of machsheves, psul of chutzim kama by a kohen tameh? And he's not even in the ballpark. Well, I'm a Rava. We have a statement of Rava. Ein machshava moeles el b'misha roy lavoda u'b'davar roy lavoda mokum roy lavoda. When do we say that a machshava of chutzim zman or chutzim kama is if it passes it? That's only if you have a Kohen who's kosher lavoda. Or if you have a carbon that's kosher for avoda, as opposed to, let's say, balas mu. Or it's a makom aroy lavoda. Right? It's in the Azara. So you need a qualified Kohen. And okay, so now we have to get into, just not sure, just see what time is. You know what? I'm going to leave that out. Maybe if we go into overtime, we could add that. Lo tema zarku lo, ela ema shachtu lo. If the Kohen Pasul does the zrika with a machshava of chutzes zman of chutzes, it doesn't passel the carbon, as we just established in the name of Rava, because he's a Kohen Pasul. However, that's only as far as zrika is concerned, but not as far as shchita. If the Kohen Pasul does the shchita, and again, there's no requirement of a Kohen with regard to shchita, and therefore the machshava of chutzim zman of chutzim koma is a machshava poselas, and there's no way that you can be machsha the carbon by doing a second round of Kabbalah. My kamashmalon. the pasla machshava. So what are you telling me? That the Mishnah is teaching me that shchita with a machshava poseles, even by a coin posel, generates a psul in the carbon, Tanina. We have it in the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah says, Lefifach hein posel b'machshava. In other words, even a coin posel could generate b'machshava. We're talking about shchita. So why would the Mishnah have to teach me again? So Gemara answers, Hakamash Malon, v'mikabala v'elech lo posel machshava. That this psul of machsheves chutz zman chutz koma on the part of a kohen pasal only applies to shchita, and not only doesn't it apply to Kabbalah, but it doesn't even apply to Zrika. My time in Rava, as we said according to Rava, that you don't have a machshava poseles unless the whole stage is set and everything else is kosher. But if we're talking about a kohen pasal, then Rava says that a machshava of shalom bisman or shalom koma would not pass the carbon, and therefore you can do another Kabbalah to replace the first. And this leads us to Meisvei on the bottom of Chafov and Beis. We'll just read it very quickly because we're already going into overtime here. Chishev litenes and itana lamala lamata, or lamata lamala, is lialter kosher. Right, so we're saying that there's halach that anywhere on the mizbeach could be mechaper. Okay, this is already very very complicated. So we'll stop here, and I wish you a wonderful Shabbos. Mirz Hashem. Hopefully, we'll see each other on Yom Rishon.